Envelope was sitting on my kitchen counter when I got home from work on a Tuesday. Not a real envelope, a PDF. My brother had emailed it to me. Subject line: cost breakdown, family reunion trip. I remember setting my bag down, pouring a glass of water, and opening it on my phone while still standing at the counter in my coat. I thought it was going to be information, like, here's what the trip costs, here's where we're staying, that kind of thing. It was an invoice, with my name at the top. In the bill to field, total due $4,800. I read it 3 times. Then I put my phone face down on the counter and just stood there for a minute, staring at the kitchen faucet. I should back up. My name is Ivy. I'm 31 years old. I work in healthcare administration in Charlotte, North Carolina. I have a decent salary, a small apartment I love, and a savings account I've been building for 4 years with the specific goal of buying a house. I don't say any of this to brag. I say it because for most of my adult life, being the person in my family who has money has meant something very specific. It has meant that I am the solution to other people's problems. My parents are in their early 60s. My dad worked in manufacturing for 30 years and took an early buyout package when his plant restructured. He gets a small pension. My mom worked part-time as a school aide for most of my childhood and stopped working entirely when my grandmother got sick about 6 years ago. They live in the same house in rural Ohio where I grew up, and they get by. But they don't have a lot of room in their budget. My brother, I'll call him my brother because that's what he is 35. He has a wife and 2 kids. He works in sales. He makes decent money during good quarters and almost nothing during bad ones. He's always between things. Between jobs, between apartments, between plans. His wife is sweet and I genuinely like her, but she comes from a family that also doesn't have much, so they've always leaned on the people around them to fill the gaps. I became one of those people slowly. The way you become anything slowly, one small yes at a time. It started when I was 24 and just out of college. I lent my parents $600 to cover a car repair. They paid me back. That felt fine. Then it was $900 for a medical bill. Then it was helping my brother with a security deposit when he moved. Then it was my parents' heating bill one January. Then it was my brother's car insurance. Each one felt like a one-time thing. Each one felt like love in action. I believed that's what it was. By the time I was 28, I had what I can only describe as a shadow budget, the amount of money I actually earned, and then a separate mental accounting of how much of it was going to quietly disappear into my family before I ever got to use it. I didn't talk about it out loud. I didn't even fully acknowledge it to myself. I just kept adjusting, kept trimming my own expectations. Told myself I'd start saving for the house next year. Next year. The thing nobody tells you about being the family bank is that it changes the way they talk to you. Slowly, without anyone deciding to do it, you stop being a person and start being a resource. My parents stopped asking how I was doing and started calling when something went wrong. My brother stopped checking in and started texting dollar amounts. And I kept answering because the alternative, saying no, drawing a line, watching someone I loved struggle, felt worse than the cost. Until the invoice. Let me tell you about the trip because the trip matters. My parents' 40th wedding anniversary was coming up in the fall. My brother decided, and I want to be precise here, he decided, not anyone collectively agreed, that the family should celebrate by taking a trip together. He had a destination picked out, a 5-day rental house on the Outer Banks in North Carolina. Beautiful area. Nice idea in theory. He texted the family group chat in June, found the perfect place for the anniversary trip. OBX October, 5 days. Going to be amazing. I texted back privately and said that sounded fun, but I needed to know the cost before I could commit. He said not to worry about it. I said I wasn't worried. I just needed the number. He said it was a surprise for mom and dad and he'd explain everything later. Later never came. I texted him twice more over the following 2 weeks, and both times he said he was still working out the details. I should have pushed harder. I know that now. But I was working a lot, I was tired, and somewhere in the back of my mind I think I assumed it would be like the other trips. He'd put something together. It would cost maybe $500 per person and I'd figure it out. What I did not factor in was that my brother had booked a $9,600 rental property. I found that out when the invoice arrived. The PDF was actually fairly professional looking. He had itemized it. Rental property, $9,600, split fairly between us, with my parents' share covered equally by him and me, and then my share of the actual occupancy on top of that. The math in his version worked out to $4,800 for me. He'd also added a line item for trip coordination, which I can only assume was his time spent planning a vacation I hadn't agreed to, and another for shared groceries and incidentals, which was an estimated number, estimated pre-trip for a trip that hadn't happened yet. At the bottom, he'd written a due date, 30 days. I sat with that invoice for a long time. I made dinner. I washed the dishes. I took a shower. I kept picking up my phone and putting it back down. At one point, I called my best friend and read her the whole thing out loud, and there was a long silence on her end before she said, very quietly, "Ivy, he sent you a billing statement for a vacation." "Yeah." That he bland without asking you. "Yeah." "Okay," she said. "Okay." I want to tell you that I responded that night with something sharp and clear. I didn't. I went to sleep. I needed a day to figure out what I actually felt, separate from the shock of it. What I felt, once I had some distance, was this: I was tired. Not angry, or not only angry, tired in a way that went back years. Tired of the assumption, tired of being the person who absorbed the cost of everyone else's decisions. Tired of the fact that my brother had booked a nearly $10,000 vacation home and his first thought, apparently, was not, "Can we afford this?" but "Ivy will cover it." I called my mom the next morning. I told her I'd gotten an email from my brother and I wanted to understand what was going on. She got quiet in that specific way. She gets quiet when she knows something isn't right, but doesn't want to say so. "He's so excited about it," she said. "He's been planning it for months." "Mom, I didn't agree to this trip." "Well, you didn't say no. I didn't know the details. He just wanted it to be a surprise." I took a breath. "Did you know he was going to send me an invoice?" Another silence. "I knew he was going to talk to you about costs. It's not a conversation, it's a document with a due date." She didn't say anything for a moment. "Then, he's had a hard year, Ivy. The first 2 quarters were terrible for him. He's trying to do something nice for us." And that was it. That was the whole shape of it. He was having a hard year. He was trying to do something nice. I was the person who made that possible, not by being asked, but by simply existing with a bank account. I told my mom I needed to think and I'd call her back. I did not call her back for 11 days. During this 11 days, my brother texted me 4 times. First a follow-up asking if I'd gotten the email, then a reminder about the due date, then a text saying he needed to confirm the reservation and could I let him know by Friday. Then, on Saturday morning, a text that said, "Ivy, I don't know what your problem is, but I need an answer. This is for Mom and Dad." I had a therapist at the time. I'd been seeing her for 2 years, mostly for work stress, but increasingly for exactly this kind of thing. I brought the invoice to my session. I showed it to her on my phone. She looked at it for a moment and said, "What would it mean to you to say no?" I said I wasn't sure. She said, "Try to say it out loud." I said, "I'm not paying this." She said, "How does that feel?" I said it felt like relief and terror at the same time, like standing at the edge of something and not knowing what was on the other side. She said that was about right. I spent that weekend going through my own financial records. I'd never done a full accounting before. I'd kept it vague on purpose, I think, because looking directly at it would have forced me to feel something. I sat at my kitchen table with a spreadsheet and I went back 3 years. 3 years. 36 months. The number I came up with was $23,400. That's what I had transferred, lent, or quietly paid in that window. Some of it was loans that were technically supposed to be paid back. Some of it was gifts I'd told myself I was giving freely. All of it was gone. I stared at that number for a long time. Then I closed the spreadsheet and opened a new email. The subject line I chose was cost breakdown family reunion trip. I did not write a lot. I'm not a person who does well with long emails when I'm emotional. I say things I don't mean, or I say too much, or I go in circles. So I kept it short. I wrote, I won't be attending the trip and I won't be contributing to the cost. Going forward, I'm not in a position to provide financial support to anyone in the family. This isn't up for discussion. I wish everyone a good time. I read it 4 times. I changed the word providing to offering. Then I changed it back. Then I hit send. My phone started ringing within the hour. My brother called twice. I didn't answer. He texted, "Are you serious right now?" Then mom is devastated. Then, "You're going to ruin this for everyone over money." Then, finally, a voice memo I made the mistake of listening to, in which he spent about 4 minutes explaining to me that I was selfish, that I'd always made everything about myself, that our parents had sacrificed everything for us, and I couldn't be bothered to contribute to one trip for their anniversary. My mom called. I answered that one. The conversation was hard. She wasn't cruel. My mom is not a cruel person, but she kept circling back to the idea that I was hurting her by saying no. Not that my brother had done something wrong. Not that booking a $9,600 house without my input was unreasonable. Just that I was hurting her. "Why does it have to be so much?" she said. "Is it really about the money?" "Yes," I said. "It is about the money. $4,800 is a lot of money. But you have it." I paused. "Having something doesn't mean it's available to you." She didn't understand what I meant by that. I don't think she was trying not to understand. I think the concept genuinely didn't translate. My dad called 2 days later. He was calmer. My dad is the quieter one. He said he understood I was upset, but he hoped I'd reconsider, because it would mean a lot to them to have me there. I said, "Dad, I want to be there. I just can't pay $4,800 for a trip I didn't plan." He said, "What if we found a less expensive place?" I said that would be different, and I appreciated him asking. He said he'd talk to my brother. 3 days passed. My brother did not find a less expensive place. What he did instead was call my workplace. I work in a mid-sized healthcare administration office. I have a direct line and a general office number. He called the general number and asked to speak to my supervisor, a woman I genuinely respect and who has always been kind to me, came to my desk that afternoon and said, in the most professional way possible, that my brother had called and that while she obviously wasn't going to share the content of the call with the rest of the office, she wanted to check in on me. I think I went very still. I asked what he had said. She said he'd expressed concern about my mental state and suggested I might be having some difficulties that were affecting my judgment. I thanked her, told her I was fine and would handle it, and went to the bathroom and stood there for a couple of minutes breathing. That was the moment things changed. There's a version of me, the version that existed 3 years ago, or 5 years ago, or every year before this one, who would have called him and apologized, who would have found a way to make it my fault, who would have paid the $4,800 just to make it stop. That version of me was done. I went back to my desk, found the number for the bank where I'd been keeping a small emergency credit card that I had previously, stupidly, given my parents access to for genuine emergencies. I called and cancelled it. Then I called my own bank and put a note on my account. Then I called a lawyer friend, not a family law attorney, but someone who knew enough, and I described what had happened with the workplace call. She said the word I needed to hear, which was harassment. She said if he contacted my workplace again, I had options. She walked me through what those options looked like: documenting, sending a certified letter, the possibility of a restraining order if it escalated. She also asked if he had access to any of my financial accounts. He didn't, directly, but I realized in telling her that my parents had access to the emergency card, and I had never checked, not really checked, whether anything had been charged to it outside of the 1 or 2 things I'd approved. I pulled the statements that night. There were 11 charges I didn't recognize, spanning 14 months. The total was $3,100. They were small individually. A grocery run, a tank of gas, a car payment, an Amazon order I didn't place. None of them were things I'd been asked about. None of them were things I'd been asked about. None of them were things I'd approved. I don't know how to explain what it felt like to see that laid out on a screen. It wasn't just anger. It was something more specific, the feeling of having your own perception of your life corrected. I had thought I was choosing to help my family. I had thought there was generosity involved on my part, even when it was hard. What I was looking at now suggested that some of it had just been taken. I disputed all 11 charges. The bank flagged several of them as unauthorized use and began their process. It took about 6 weeks to resolve, but ultimately most of it came back. I did not tell my parents I had done this before they found out on their own. I know some people would say I should have confronted them directly first. Honestly, I wasn't sure what I would say. I wasn't sure I could have that conversation without either crying so hard I couldn't speak or saying something I couldn't take back. So I let the bank handle the facts, and I gave myself time to figure out the words. My parents called when the dispute notices arrived. My mom cried. My dad sounded hollowed out. They didn't deny any of it, which told me they'd known what they were doing, at least on some level. My mom said they'd intended to tell me that it was temporary, that things had been so hard. I said I knew things had been hard. I said I had tried to help. I said help is only help when both people know it's happening. She cried harder. I kept my voice even. I had practiced keeping my voice even. I said, I love you both. I'm not going to disappear from your lives, but this has to stop completely, and I need time before we talk again. Then I hung up. My brother sent me one more email after that. It was long, several paragraphs about how I had betrayed the family, how I was selfish and cold and nothing like the person he thought I was, how our parents were devastated and it was my fault. He said I had ruined the anniversary trip. He said I had ruined his ability to trust me. He said he hoped I was happy. I read the whole thing. Then I archived it without responding and blocked his email address. I didn't go to therapy that week because I had to reschedule, but I wrote down how I felt in my journal instead. I wrote for about 40 minutes. What came out wasn't what I expected. I wasn't writing about being angry. I was writing about grief. For the version of my family I had believed I had, for the idea that all those years of helping had been building towards something. They hadn't been building toward anything. They'd just been going. That fall, my parents went to the Outer Banks without me. I don't know if my brother found a way to cover the costs, or if they stayed somewhere cheaper. I didn't ask. I took 4 days off work and drove to Vermont. I'd wanted to go for years and kept putting it off. I rented a small cabin near a lake, hiked every day, ate dinner alone at a restaurant when nobody knew me, and slept better than I had in longer than I could remember. On the third night, I sat outside after dark and looked at the water and thought about the spreadsheet. $23,400, plus the disputed charges, plus years of things that were too small to track. I thought about what I would have now if I'd had all of that. I didn't let myself stay in that thought too long because it doesn't help, but I sat with it for a few minutes. Just let it be real. I've put a boundary on my family contact that I've stuck to for 8 months now. I talk to my parents once every 2 weeks. On a call, I control the length of. My brother and I have not spoken. I send my parents a card on holidays. I will visit eventually. I'm not ready yet, but eventually I will. I opened a high-yield savings account in January and set up an automatic transfer every month. My house fund now has more in it than it's ever had, because I am the only one spending from it. I'm not at peace with everything. I don't think I'm supposed to be yet. There are nights when I think about my mom crying on the phone, and I feel something complicated that I don't have a clean name for. There are moments when I wonder if I should have done things differently, said something sooner, drawn a line before things got so far. But then I think about the invoice, the PDF with my name at the top, the itemized lines, the 30-day due date, and I think about the 11 charges I didn't approve, And I think about my supervisor coming to my desk to tell me my brother had called her. And I think, no. I didn't wait too long. I waited exactly as long as it took me to understand what was actually happening. I needed that time. I don't regret it. What I know now is that love and obligation can look identical from the inside for a very long time. Untangling them is slow, and it is painful, and it costs something. But the alternative, staying tangled, paying indefinitely for things you never agreed to, funding a version of family life that only works because you won't say stop, costs more. It just costs more quietly, so you don't notice until you open a spreadsheet and look. I'm looking now.